One of the things that I love about the process of music production is that you can use software and plugins for purposes that they weren't initially designed for. And lately I've been taking guitar amp simulations, and in particular cabs, not for guitar playing, but to help glue my mixes together and make them sound a little bit more lively. And so I want to go through my process for doing that and show you some tips and tricks along the way that you can use and hopefully expand upon in your own mixes and beats and songs. So let's get into it. Most of the time these days when we're working with sounds, it's usually not recorded in a live environment, as often as it used to be anyway. And so one of the things that you lose in that process is the natural sense of space that a lot of sounds have. And especially the sense of cohesion that multiple instruments have together when they're recorded in the same space at the same time, right? And one of the things I really like about using cabs to help solve this problem is that it's the most subtle on a scale of, say, 0 to drenched reverb, right? And so I'm gonna show you guys the power of this and what it can do. So here's the kind of the beat that we're working with today. So the first thing that we're gonna do is create a return track or an aux track with the cabinet so that we can send multiple things to that very same cabinet. So I'm gonna open up my returns on the bottom right here, and I have one called glue set up already. And you have quite a few options for guitar amp simulations. A lot of DAWs have a native one. So in Ableton, for example, it's just called cabinet, and you can choose like the speaker arrangement that you want. In Logic, I think there's one called Amp Designer. But there's also obviously some other options, and my personal favorite is to use Guitar Rig. And the reason for that is when you open up a cabinet here, you get access to this slider called the dry to air slider, and it basically simulates the distance between the mic and the speaker cone increasing or decreasing, and it adds another sense of depth that I love in this whole entire process. Now the first thing I want to do here is just make sure that we're listening to the left and right channels. So if you go up to the top and you select this R, and then make sure that stereo is selected in the cab, we'll be good to go. Because we're gonna be sending instruments that have information in the entire stereo field. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm actually gonna solo the cab so you can hear what it sounds like when each instrument comes in, and I'm gonna start sending each of our instruments in this little loop here to the cab. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that some instruments are more easily able to shine through in the cab signal, usually the lower instruments like the bass and the kick and stuff. So what I like to do is just kind of create a nice basic mix just through the cab that sounds a little bit more balanced. So what I'm gonna do is bring down the bass a little bit and maybe the kick. The next thing that we're gonna do is add a little bit of compression after the cab signal so that we can, it's almost like we're adding a room mic, like a compressed room mic over the top of everything that we've got now. So I'm gonna use our old friend, the 1176. So we're gonna have a relatively fast attack and release. And I'm just gonna bring this up until we get some nice solid gain reduction in the entire signal. Now what I'm gonna do is play everything together. So the original song as well as the glue here. And you're gonna start to hear what this actually does. So here it is without any of the glue. Here's with. So it really adds some very interesting depth to the entire mix. And we're being a little bit extreme here. I think it's currently too loud, just so that you get an idea of what the difference would be. But I generally kind of like to bring this back here, maybe around like 5 or 6 dB below where we had it, and just make that mid-range a little bit more full and almost like we're listening to it in a room together, right? So once we've brought it back a little bit, here's what it might sound like. One other really cool aspect of this is that you can change the cab that you're listening to, obviously, and that will completely change the tone and the personality and the character of the mix that you're working on. So if we sort through some of these cabs, you'll hear how it changes. Ooh, listen to that one. Much brighter. And here's a bass cab. So if you're looking for that kind of scooped sound, you might want to use a bass cab. I personally really like to use the jazz amp for this type of thing. One thing I also like to do is shape the tone a little bit more with some EQ afterwards. So if I feel like it's a little bit too boomy, we can just take a little bit out. So the more that you process things as a group, I've found the more cohesive they'll sound. So one other thing that we can do is we can make this more of a dramatic effect by adding a little bit of delay on there. And there's a really easy way to do that in Ableton. You can of course use a classic delay plugin and just make it 100% wet and use a little bit of, like 20 milliseconds of delay or whatever. But in Ableton, you can do this track delay thing, which I use all the time. Listen to what this does to the sound. Isn't that crazy? So here it is out. Back in. So you can play around with those delay values and make it more or less transparent in the mix as you see fit. I really like to use this as kind of an extreme effect sometimes, almost like, we want the room to be a bigger part of the mix. So remember, if you're in the middle of making beats and you're just feeling like everything is just so separate sounding and you want it to be more of a unit, try out this amp simulation method on an aux track and play around with the delay values as well as the different speaker configurations for the sound that you're looking for. And even try processing it even more and see if you can come up with some other interesting combinations, because that's the beauty of music production. And also, I'd love to hear if you guys use this already as part of your workflow, or if you have any tips and tricks of your own that you'd like to add into the mix. See what I did there? All right, guys, until next time, take care, happy music making, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.